It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLab PGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLab PGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLab PGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLab PGH wants you to look at movement as a lifestyle, not just an activity. That's why, in addition to podcasts, 3 times a week, we bring you movement tips and lifestyle hacks on Instagram. We've also started a recent FitLab PGH features. If you go to our website, fitlabpgh.com, you'll be able to click on the FitLab PGH features info and submit your application to be featured. If you like what you hear on the podcast, if you like what you're doing, leave us some positive feedback on Apple iTunes, otherwise known as Apple Podcasts. Today, we sat down in downtown Pittsburgh. We talked to a Pittsburgh native, John Rossmiller. John left Pittsburgh for a few years for college, some time in the military, and he's back in Pittsburgh and made the decision to open ALTUS-HPO coming soon. We talked to John about how he decided to open a movement facility and what his plans are for ALTUS-HPO. We think it's an exciting opportunity for movers in Pittsburgh, and we think you'll enjoy it too. FitLab PGH is back with another podcast episode. We're not in a coffee shop, but I did just finish drinking a coffee. So as I've said before on other FitLab PGH podcasts, every time I've had coffee in a coffee shop, it's been a good interview. We've chatted a little bit before recording today, and I know it'll be a good interview because of that. We are here today with John Rossmiller. John is the owner, ALTUS-HPO. John, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab PGH.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. This is actually my first podcast, so interesting experience.
First question I'll ask before we get into finding a little bit more about your story is you meet somebody, you're wearing an ALTUS-HPO t-shirt, you're not yet open, although we're hoping for soon. What's your description, kind of your elevator spiel, ALTUS-HPO is, and go?
ALTUS-HPO is a fitness facility downtown Pittsburgh. HPO stands for Human Performance Optimization. So we are about identifying and implementing the ideal way for building an all-around fitness experience.
And my question I always ask FitLab PGH people that we interview is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you still here? Or if not, what brought you here?
So yeah, I am a Pittsburgh native. I was originally born on the north side. We moved out near Seven Springs when I was a kid. I came back after college. I was here for a while after college. Joined the Army, went away for 7 years, came back again in 2014. And I'm back here because this is where my family's from. Pittsburgh has always been a home to me, kind of a place in my heart. I've always loved Pittsburgh, so that's why I'm here again.
One could almost say it's like Hotel California. You can check out, but you could never leave.
Oh, yeah, you never leave because you bring it with you wherever you go.
question I'm always interested in learning about when we talk to FitLab PGH people is, are you a lifetime mover? In other words, were you active as a kid? Obviously, right now you either move or are a fan of movement since you're opening a fitness facility, but what was it like growing up?
Yeah, I am definitely a lifetime mover. I can thank my parents for that one. When we lived on the north side, we lived right next to Riverview Park. If you're familiar with it, it's a relatively large park. So I always kind of had woods around me. And then we moved out to the country once again, surrounded by fields and woods. My parents bought a small hobby farm. So I grew up on a small farm through high school. And then I started playing sports my junior year in high school. Well, actually, I would say my sophomore year in high school. Because I ran cross country my sophomore year in high school, which I only did because my sister did it. It wasn't something that I thoroughly enjoyed. Then I started playing football my junior year in high school. I played 2 years of football, and I was lucky enough to get my college education paid for through football. So went to Colgate University, played football there, and got out, and that was always just sort of part of my lifestyle, mostly lifting weights at that point. But I got into performance training and eventually got into more of the speed training and whatnot. But once I had sort of decided that I was done with football, because I played a little bit of indoor football after college. I don't think we mentioned that in our previous conversation, but
I'm always curious, what was the impetus, or when did you realize, okay, football's over? And do you remember if that was an easy decision or one that you struggled with?
It was difficult for me. I tend to be sort of a rabid dog with a bone. I don't let go of things. So it was definitely an emotional experience when I decided I was done, but there was no confusion on my part. I knew that I had gone as far as I wanted to go. The moment I decided that I was done with football was, I actually had I was still playing indoor football, semi-pro that year. So I got an opportunity to try out with the Bills, and I went up there, I did a tryout, and, the response back I got was that I was a tweener, which was a term that I had never heard before. I wasn't familiar with it. But essentially I was in between positions. So I was too short. I was heavier and shorter and slower than their D ends, but I was lighter and faster than their D tackles. So I either needed to, go one way or the other. And, what they told me was to, gain 20 pounds. And during that tryout, I was 285. So they said, gain 20 pounds, and look harder, or, come back in 3 months if you do that. So I was like, all right, that's not happening. Done.
I'm curious. I know there's a lot of publicity out there about football and CTE. With your kids, would you let them play football, or up in the air still?
I have no concerns over CTE. I have a multitude of other concerns that revolve around football. But I had looked into, the research on that, and one of the things that, I can't remember who I was reading. It was a neurologist whose kid plays football, right? And he said that he felt that the public fear of it was way blown out of proportion, because for kids who are playing football, their impacts are not nearly as, there's not nearly as much force in those impacts, number one. And number two, the number of, impact events they have to have for CTE to ever become a real concern, you have to become a pro. And the 0.0001% of football players that, ever get to that level, he said, it's just, he's having fun right now, and there's really no risk. So
think it's interesting you said that the neurologist had the public perception. We were talking a little bit before recording about people's response or perceptions of an event and stress. And I think obviously this is an emotional topic, and it's very easy to say, well, yes or no, rather than saying, let me look at this and consider everything on a one-on-one basis or a one-by-one basis.
Yeah. So if he wanted to play football, if he really wanted to play football, I'd let him go with it because I want him to be active. Although knowing his personality, I highly doubt he would. He'll be into other things. But I'm more focused on sort of what I would consider natural human movements or natural sports, rather than football, for example.
So you finish the tryout with the Bills. You're either too fast and don't weigh enough, or too short and weigh too much to do it. You say, okay, I'm done with football. You made the decision to join the military. How did that come about?
Honestly, that was kind of always in the back of my mind. When I finally joined, it was actually the fourth time that I had looked into the military. When I was in high school, I said to myself, if I don't get a scholarship, then I'm going to join the Marines. And then when I graduated college, I was going to go do Marine OCS, be an officer. And then I got an opportunity to keep playing. So I played indoor football. And then, when I thought I was done the third time, I was done playing indoor football, and I had been talking to an Army recruiter at that point, and I was about 3 days away from shipping out when I got the call for a tryout with the Bills, and I called up my recruiter. I was like, I really hate to do this to you, but I'm not going. And so I canceled that one, and then by the time I did join, so I was 27 again when I finally started talking to a recruiter for the fourth time. And by then I was definitely, there was no interest at that point of even if I did get a call for a tryout, I wasn't interested. I was done. So the military was always there. And for me this time, thank goodness I waited that long and I was older. So I did a lot more research and knew exactly, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it. And, I was able to execute that.
What do you think the reason is for the interest in the military? Did you have family members who were members as you were growing up, or what was the reason?
No, honestly, it's just in my DNA. I am the black sheep of my family. It's not something that runs in my family at all. My grandfather, both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. But that wasn't something that was it didn't permeate through our family culture at all. It was just something that, as a young boy, you see these movies or, read these. I watched a lot of the History Channel growing up, and growing up, the History Channel used to be very different than it is now. It actually was about history. So I watched a lot of documentaries, and it was just something that I guess I always wanted to be. Sort of like that 80s commercial for the Army, be all you can be. That was what I wanted to do.
You joined the Army, you were selected for the Rangers. What was the reason for getting out?
I got out because I had to. I had a pretty severe injury. 2011, I had a bad jump. I broke my knee, crushed disc in my back, broke 2 bones in my shoulder, tore my labrum all the way around, nerve damage in my shoulder. I'm still missing 50% of my rotator cuff. So a couple of other small injuries, and it was, I hung on for quite a while. So that was 2011, and I kept thinking that I'd be able to come back from it. And I actually came back enough to deploy again. But it was my deployment in 2013 where I was in, and I also had family, taking care of my son. He had severe medical issues. So it's a multitude of things, just sort of this perfect storm. In 2013, I was deployed, and at one point I was on the sat phone with my wife and the doctor. My son was in the ICU again. And I had her put the doctor on the phone, and I was just like, hey, give me a no BS answer. Do I need to get on a plane and come home right now? Is he, what's his condition? Are you going to be able to, pull him out of this or whatever? So we drove down to Bagram. I was about an hour away from the Bagram airfield, and we drove down there, and my regimental sergeant major got wind of my family situation and why I was down there. And we had driven down there just sort of a just in case. I stayed in contact with my wife, and they were going to let me know if I needed to get on a plane and come home. And the regimental sergeant major called me into his office, and he said, hey, you need to face the music. Like, this is our life. You can't live this life anymore. You've got all these issues with you. You've got your family issues. You need to go to another unit and work a desk job, or you need to get out. And that was it.
So kind of the decision from life was made for you.
Yeah, I was, like I said, maybe I still am sort of a rabid dog with a bone, and sometimes I just can't let go of things.
You get out, you come back to Pittsburgh, you go back to school and get a master's degree. What did you get a master's degree in?
So I got my MBA. I was looking at it from the perspective of, okay, now I'm going into a different era of my life, obviously, and I want to be as successful in that part of my life as I have been in other areas of my life. So this is the best time for me to add that tool to my toolbox. So yeah, I got out, got my MBA from Pitt.
And we're here in the office of ALTUS-HPO. So clearly you made the decision that you weren't going to take the MBA and use it in a traditional way. Why ALTUS-HPO, and how long has this been percolating in your mind that, I'm going to have my own facility of some sort or the other regarding movement?
Well, that's an interesting question. The facility has been percolating in my mind since probably 2016, but solving the problem of human performance optimization has been in my mind since 2011. 2011, I was working in the Ranger Athlete Warrior office. That was our version of a strength and conditioning program. So we had, it's a little bit different makeup, but it was a strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, and mental performance coaches, and physical therapists, and not psychiatrists, but social workers, that sort of thing, to help with family readiness and whatnot. So the whole package of keep getting guys ready. And we had constantly discussed, how do you integrate these various different dimensions, psychology, cognition, and physical performance? How do you integrate them into one cohesive program? So that's always been in my mind, trying to solve that problem. And the facility was a more recent development as I started to do the market research and start to understand that there was a way to bring that product, to shape that product to a market that would be interested in it.
So to some extent, you actually are using what you learned in the MBA program.
Yeah, actually very much so. I thought Pitt's program was phenomenal. I don't think it gets enough credit. I think that the wealth of resources at the Katz Graduate School of Business is, to this day, I am still extremely grateful that I got access to some of my professors, some of the adjunct professors who had the real world experience, and just how open they were and helpful, and knowing their background, the fact that they would give me the time of day and all of the knowledge that they had was awesome.
And we're sitting here in the basement in downtown Pittsburgh. Why downtown Pittsburgh for a facility? I know you want to do a lot of things that we'll talk about in the next few minutes, but how did you pick downtown Pittsburgh?
Well, my original intent was, as I had told you earlier, it was not for downtown Pittsburgh, but once I was made aware of this facility, and I started to look, because I hadn't originally looked at the downtown market, and That was just really, it was just an oversight on my part. I hadn't considered it. And, but once I was made aware of this, this particular commercial property that was available, and I started to look at the downtown market, I started to realize that that really was the ideal demographic for people who'd be interested in what we were bringing to the market. And, there's a lot of business professionals who maybe they were college athletes, or maybe they've just been, lifetime movers, right? They've always been lifetime movers, and they're just people like me who just enjoy living that lifestyle, and they want to get better at it. And it would be nice to have, a coach, a trainer, and have that consistent access to that elite level of knowledge and training that maybe they used to get when they were in college, or maybe they never got it. They're just lifetime movers. And it'd be nice to have somebody who, got their master's degree in exercise science and has decades of experience in training professional athletes, or, special operations soldiers or whatever. And, they can get access to that for the same price that they're paying for not as much of a professional experience.
I know we were talking before we started recording. You said that you're a big fan of the process rather than the actual event. And that was part of the reason for ALTUS-HPO. And the fact that many times you can take multiple steps, and you're bringing into play your experiences with rucking. Can you talk a little bit about that? You like the process versus the actual event?
Yeah. So, that is fundamental to our philosophy. Ultimately, I came to that conclusion when thinking about trying to solve that HPO problem, because when we had civilian strength coaches come into the Ranger Athlete Warrior program, and they brought their knowledge and experience, but also their way of thinking about the problem to that program. And that way of thinking is saying there's this end goal in mind. We've got this sport that we have to train for. How do we take this square peg and fit them into a round hole? Right. But when you're thinking about human performance optimization, you really have to go about it from a whole different mindset than, strength coaching traditionally would. There is no end goal. This is a square peg. How do we make this a better square peg? And focus on, this is what is natural human movement. This is, so sort of the mechanics of how we move, but then also the different systems that we have, and how do they adapt to the stresses that we apply to them, our nervous system, our muscular system, skeletal system, and understanding how do they adapt so that we can make them recover faster, so that we can make them increase the rate of force development, right? So that we can, you can be a faster runner, you can throw a ball farther or faster or harder, or you can climb, basic movements, climbing, throwing, squatting, walking, and building that foundation so that if you have that strong foundation, you can transfer that into specificity if you want to. But we are focused on really making a really strong foundation. Sort of maybe my upbringing is that, I mentioned that, part of my childhood was growing up on a farm. So I had a really strong foundation that I didn't appreciate or understand when I was younger. But it allowed me to go into these specific areas. Like, I didn't start playing football till I was a junior in high school. And I started playing football, and I got a scholarship right away because of the foundation that daily movement and work had given me.
I know I've heard some sports coaches say that there are a lot of really good basketball players out there, or a lot of really good football players out there, but they aren't really good athletes because they haven't had a variety of movement experiences. Mm-hmm. If you grow up on a farm, having grown up on a farm also, you get a wide variety of movement experiences. because that's just what you have to do. Whereas if you start playing football when you're 6 or 7 years old and you play football, you learn how to play football, but you really don't know how to move.
Yeah, you end up in a silo. And it's sort of, you think about it in terms of building a pyramid, and ultimately you end up, creating this athletic pyramid that has an extremely narrow base and a very high peak and crumples very easily.
We've talked on my other podcast, Moving to Live, with a number of people who are quite active, and many of them were very, very competitive in a variety of sports when they were younger. And inevitably, it seems if they're above the age of about 35 or so, maybe a little bit younger than that, they adapt in their mentalities from saying, I want to see how fast I can get at this event or how good I can get at this event, to I want to be able to do these events or these activities until the day I die. So very often you hear somebody say, oh, I can't do that anymore because I hurt my back, or I'm too old, or I just can't do that because I'm not strong enough. And it sounds like the HPO model that you're doing is to make somebody who, whether they want to run the Pittsburgh Marathon, whether they want to do the Dirty Dozen, whether they want to compete in the CrossFit Games, they're developing the movement skills, the strength, the aerobic capacity, so they can do that if that's what they choose, or they can just enjoy life as somebody who moves better. Would that be an adequate interpretation?
Yeah, I would say that. One of our philosophies is focus on what you can do and continue to do that. And then what you can do will improve, it will enhance, it will increase. You sort of think of it in terms of your destiny will reveal itself,
Somebody's listening to this, they work downtown, they say, well, why should I join ALTUS-HPO instead of some other facility? Kind of talk a little bit, what are you going to offer when you open? And we haven't really talked about this. When's the anticipated opening for ALTUS-HPO?
Yeah, so we expect to do our grand opening at the end of January. So it might be February 1. Right now, obviously there's some construction aspects that are up in the air, so that's why we haven't set that hard date. But what we are offering is, so we have one side of the house, one side of the facility is focused on improving metabolic pathways, so aerobic, anaerobic pathways, and we're using the VersaClimber as one of our low-impact machines to do that. If you don't know what a VersaClimber is, you definitely need to get on one, because you will get a phenomenal full-body workout in the shortest time you've ever experienced, probably. But it's something that I was exposed to, working in the Ranger Athlete Warrior program, and find that you look into most professional, elite level strength and conditioning programs, you will probably see in their facility a VersaClimber.
Either a VersaClimber, or some of them may have the Jacob's Ladder instead.
Yes. So, and that is a really sore spot for us right now, actually, because we trained a lot of guys on the Jacob's Ladder getting ready for selection. I wanted to get a Jacob's Ladder, but we didn't have enough space for it yet.
They take up a lot of space.
Yeah. My wife is like, when are we getting a Jacob's Ladder? We're going to get a Jacob's Ladder. I was like, I promise you, we will get a Jacob's Ladder one day, just not for the opening. I
once had the opportunity for a ridiculously cheap price to get a Jacob's Ladder out of a facility that was closing. And unfortunately, where I was living, I just didn't have the room. And it still bothers me to this day.
Yeah. Oh, you're always going to regret that. I know. Jacob's Ladders are, they're wonderful. The other thing we wanted to get, which, we had a ton of things on our wish list that we didn't get, but a tread wall was another one we wanted to get. That would have been sweet. But anyways.
We were talking before we started recording. Also, you mentioned that you were going to have laundry service. Talk a little bit. Somebody who's working downtown, this can basically be a one-stop shop. How does that work?
Yeah. So, like I said, we wanted to provide that elite level professional experience for people who want to train, which, in my prior experience, one of the benefits that I had was that I could take all of my athletic gear that I worked out in, throw it in the laundry bag and throw it in the laundry bin, and I didn't have to worry about it. It was going to be back in my locker when I came back. So that's one of the things that we offer, is that you don't have to carry your gym bag to work. You don't have to worry about the logistics of, bringing all your athletic gear with you to work and getting to the gym and then changing out and everything like that. So you can just walk down to our facility, grab your stuff out of your locker. It's already been washed for you. You go change, you come back, you throw it back in the laundry bag, you throw it back in the locker, or throw it in the laundry bin, and we wash it for you and we put it back in your locker. So that's it. You just go to work and get your workout in.
We're talking to John Rossmiller of ALTUS-HPO. People who are listening to this, is ALTUS-HPO, is it going to be all classes? Individuals can come in here and work out on their own, personal training, all of the above, only some of the above?
So it's all of the above, but it's scheduled. So our primary product is going to be the classes, the VersaClimber classes, the spin classes, the boxing fitness classes, and the functional training classes. And I mentioned we're doing a running clinic when we first open, getting people ready for the marathon, things like that. Mostly the classes. We will have open gym times. And those are generally scheduled during the off times, obviously. So in between it would be from about 8:30 to noon would be an open gym time. And then from say 1:30 to 4 would be open gym time. And then after 7 p.m., I think. But basically when the classes are not running.
And what about weekends? Will you be open weekends also?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, the facility will be open from 5:30 until 10 p.m. During the week. Well, we'll close a little bit earlier on Friday, and we'll close at 8 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But we will be open on weekends because, since I've moved back, I've realized that a lot more people are living downtown than used to be 10 years ago.
And then one other thing, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it. You plan on also having various pop-up fitness events. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things, going back to our philosophy, is we believe that the training that you do inside the facility is meant to prepare you for life outside of the facility. We're not interested in exercising to be better at exercising, right? So we want as much as possible to get our members involved in outside events. So getting on active.com, being part of the numerous fitness related, Facebook clubs and things like that. So this weekend, for example, I'm a member of the Steel City Ruck Club, and, they were doing an event on Saturday, and I realized, hey, this is a perfect time to invite some of the people who might be interested in number one, becoming a part of our facility once we do get open. But in general, the people who want to learn a little bit more about how to get better at, say, for example, walking under load. Like I had to train Rangers on how to improve their gait. And these are guys who are already professionals at walking under very heavy loads. But there's with those guys, for example, you had to change the mechanics so they weren't destroying their knees and their back over time, and it applies with runners, the same thing, so you don't get the runner's knee, patellar tendonitis and things like that. There's, mechanical, improvements that, I'd love to help people out with. So, we threw that out there for this weekend, but we want to do every weekend just another pop-up event until we get open. And then once we are open, to have that running list of these are the events in the area. Let's get a team together. Let's go do this 5K run together. Let's go do this ruck, or let's go do this obstacle course, or let's go do this hike, whatever it is, whatever people are interested in. We want it to be part of a community event.
We're talking with John Rossmiller. He is the owner of ALTUS-HPO. HPO is for Human Performance Optimization. Look for them opening up sometime towards the end of January, early February. John, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab PGH and tell us about ALTUS-HPO.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLab PGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLab PGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.